ourselves, in our people, and in our unity, in the courage that we have to say no to racism and injustice. And so this is about our unity, our togetherness, our standing, our being willing to face macing, marching, and anything else in order that out of that unity we will have a victory. Together we shall turn back racism and injustice. It is justice, manhood, racism, power. And that's why we say we are people of freedom and dignity, for there is no freedom without dignity. There is no dignity without justice, without manhood, and without power. We are calling for manhood, for justice, for power. And we know that through this means we will free both the white man and we will cloak the black man with a greater dignity than ever before. And this, friends, is why I still say our purpose is to, in the words of Isaiah, continue to work unceasingly for that day when every man will dwell under his fig tree and when no man will ever fear, because God wills that no child of his should live by fear or by hate or by guilt. It is as written in the New Testament, for God so loved the world, not you individually so much, or the church individually, as all humankind. And so we are a movement together to establish justice, manhood, and power, and thus to create a Memphis where there is more dignity and freedom for all our people than ever before.
This film is about a strike that began in the winter of 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. The strikers were public employees of the sanitation department. They were also black. Their decision to strike came shortly after a grievance by sewer workers who were sent home one day when it began raining. Only the white workers remained. They were paid in full for that day. The black workers complained. They had received nothing. Following a series of meetings, the sanitation workers agreed that the time had come to dramatize their feelings. What you see now is what the news media had reported about the sanitation worker prior to the strike. We knew very little about these men, about the money they made, the conditions they worked under, or the day-to-day problems they had. We didn't know where they lived, but we had a good idea where they didn't live. We learned only that they wanted a union to represent them, and they wanted payroll deduction of union dues to be handled by the city. They asked for an effective grievance procedure, promotions, and payment for overtime. They had always wanted these things, but no one listened until another ingredient was added.
Police are scrambling down Beale Street now. There's been a call of help from other officers. Officers are in trouble. And these other officers are responding, and there they go. We don't know what happened. We don't know what is happening. Apparently,
a strike. Once it begins, how do you assess it? Where do you get your information about it? How do you interpret it? The black community saw in the problems of the sanitation workers their own frustrating experiences. They found in the union negotiator a voice for their own feelings.
Mr. Chairman, what's your reaction to the mayor's statement?
My reaction to the mayor's statement that he has been threatening to do this since we opened the meetings here a couple of days ago. He's not changing at all. It's natural. He's going to try his muscle. The men are going to try to hold on to their jobs. May the better man come out on top.
For the average white person who was inconvenienced by the strike, it It was Mayor Henry Loeb's position that made sense. The strike was in violation of the law.
Now, it's certainly right that you should come to your mayor and bring up anything you want. You can ask me any question, just as you used to ask me when I made the whole department once a month. Public employees cannot strike against their employer, and this you can't do. I have a responsibility as mayor, to be fair to you, but I also have a responsibility as mayor to see that we don't have a health problem in Memphis. And what we've got to do, and this is what I suggested. This is what I suggested, was that it's time to go to work and it's time to talk. I suggested to these men today that you go back to work.
You folks met with me last night when I got in town. We met again this morning. I met again at lunch. I conceded. I don't know of any law in Tennessee that says you have to subject yourself to indentured servitude, but I conceded as a public employee, you don't need a law. If you're striking, it's in violation of the law. Each of you were appraised of this. And neither your representative, T.O. Jones, or any of the other representatives recommended that you continue, that you go out or do anything else. It was your individual judgment. Is that right?
And so a polarization was effected, and past experiences were likely to determine for each person not only what he saw and who he listened to, but even the kinds of things he remembered. And what about you? Are you more impressed by this scene? Or perhaps it's these that you'll remember. Some of the impressions about the strike were wrapped up in feelings about these men. Were they the protectors, or were they the tormentors?
When he go to busting heads, I'm gonna tell him he can't do that. I'm telling you now, Mr. Austin, if you can't get somebody over here to get justice for us, you cannot bust our damn head. I feel if he is high enough to be to bust my head, he should be high enough to get the damn mayor over here. And that's my feeling. That's my feeling. I feel like we have been assaulted by the police department.
We would like to see some kind of agreement made quickly because garbage piled up as high as two-story buildings is not really
Well, now, wait a minute. Let's talk facts. Garbage is not piling up. And in the second place... And in the second place...
Well, there is the fact that it is piling up.
There are many things that we've agreed on. There's one that we're not going to agree on, I'm afraid, and that's the union dues checkoff. I'm protecting the men and not forcing them to pay union dues.
You got? That's right. Bring that. Let's dump Henry in the garbage can. Put it on down there.
When you haven't got anything, you can't give. Because if you give, you haven't got anything. Not even the title to nothing. So you're at the place now where you can't give. It's up to the others to give. Now, I don't know when they will get together on these wages. The council says they can pay 10 cents an hour increase. The mayor says they can't pay but 8, and they can't do that till next July. Who's going to wait till next July?
There were many voices, but which ones reached both sides? Some people relied on the newspapers for their information, but some who did were disappointed.
I'm way off in New York, where every day the papers report and debate what is happening here. I am sure your papers do not report and debate fully the truth of what is happening.
And I regret that I believe those people yesterday, when they told me there'd be an honest council meeting today, and you and I would have a chance to talk to this council. I regret I believed them. They lied to me and they lied to you. The previous speaker talked about this filthy, rotten, reductive cartoon in this morning's paper. This newspaper served notice on your city that you're a bunch of anarchists, a bunch of communists, a bunch of troublemakers. They got a picture of a black man sitting on a garbage can with a big word of anarchy across the picture. Am I right? Right here.
A sit-in at City Hall resulted in a mass march to jail. For some, marching and singing together had a special meaning, and no one could express it better than this man.
You're doing many things here in this struggle. You are demanding that this city will respect the dignity of labor. So often we overlook the worth and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight that whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. One day our society must come to see this. One day our society will come to respect the sanitation worker if it is to survive, for the person who picks up our garbage as in the final analysis is as significant as the physician, for if he doesn't do his job, diseases are rampant. All labor has dignity. But you are doing another thing. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages.
I have been pleading for the last 10 days to keep this movement in labor. And you saw what we got. I've been pleading with the hotheads of this town to keep cool. You see what we got. Well, I'm meeting tonight. We're calling a special meeting with our board of directors. And I'm asking the board of directors for the permission to call Carmichael and Ralph Brown to Memphis and
Carmichael and Brown are not the problem. They are products of the problem. They are rather angry fellows, but their anger is a derivative anger, not a congenital anger. Their anger is derived from the continued existence of evil conditions within our society. And I would rather put my time and place my energy into getting rid of these conditions, because as long as they're here, they're going to produce angry people. After all, Mr. Brown and Mr. Carmichael did not invent or bring slavery into being. They did not create slums. They did not create unemployment. They did not create segregated schools. And we've got to come to see that the causal basis for the riots taking place in our country must be traced to something much deeper than any particular individual.
On March 28th, Martin Luther King led what was to be a peaceful march. But it was obvious that the march was not well planned.
Those sounds you hear are tear gas canisters off in the distance. Police are firing the tear gas guns toward Claiborne Temple in an attempt to disperse this unruly mob. Police are moving in from every direction. Another tear gas canister has just gone off, and we're moving out of the way.
There is hereby ordered and invoked a curfew which requires all citizens to be off the streets of the city of Memphis by 7 p.m. tonight and remain off the streets until 5 a.m. Persons on the streets during these hours who do not have legitimate business or emergency reasons will be subject to arrest. What needs to be done will be done.
In less than a week, King was preparing to lead another march. He would prove that it was still possible to lead a nonviolent demonstration. On the night of April 3rd, he attended a mass rally. There he spoke to the strikers and their supporters.
That's always the problem with a little violence. You know what happened the other day, and the press dealt only with the window breaking. I read the articles. They very seldom got around to mentioning the fact that 1,300 sanitation workers are on strike and that Memphis is not being fair to them and that Mayor Loeb is in dire need of a doctor. They didn't get around to that. Now we're going to march again, and we've got to march again in order to put the issue where it is supposed to be. And force everybody to see that there are 1,300 of God's children here suffering. Sometimes going hungry, going through dark and dreary nights, wondering how this thing is going to come out. That's the issue. And we've got to say to the nation, we know how it's coming out. For when people get caught up with that which is right and they are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory.
In less than 24 hours, Martin Luther King was dead, the victim of an assassin's bullet. The frustrations of whites as well as blacks were compounded by the tragic news. The eloquent spokesman for not only the sanitation workers, but for all black people, had been silenced. And the tense situation grew worse.
There are a lot of things in Memphis's future. In the first place, what came up is tragic. I'd like to say, and I know I speak for each of you, that unlike some of the national publicity, each of us, heart and prayers are with Ms. King and the King family. Certainly we wish that the incident had happened elsewhere if it had to happen. But each of us knows that violence begets nothing but trouble for everybody, and each of us sincerely wishes that it hadn't happened and regrets that this thing did happen. And my sympathies, and speaking for you, and I know that I do speak to you, for you, have been sent to Ms. King.
I want our conditions of employment in writing, and I can't see any reason in the world why the mayor, thank you, why the mayor and the council, why the mayor or the council or the council or the mayor or somebody in authority can't take these conditions of employment and address them to us in the same way as you address a letter to a Ford dealer or a Chevrolet dealer.
We come here this morning with a great deal of sadness in our hearts, but also with a great deal of anger, sir. What has happened in our city is the result of injustice and of oppression and the lack of human decency and concern for human beings. What we come here for this morning, sir, is to appeal to you out of the fervor of our hearts that this shall be ruled with justice and justice for all. I realize we live in a society of law and order. We must have laws, but I would remind you most respectfully, sir, that there are laws that are greater than the laws of Memphis and of Tennessee, the laws of God. And the laws of God are not subject to any gallows pole.
Frank, here's the flag. It's already out there.
After 2.5 months, the strike ended. The city gave official recognition to the union, and a dues checkoff system was initiated. With an immediate wage increase of 10 cents an hour, the lowest pay for a sanitation worker would now be $1.70 per hour, or $68 per week. An additional 5 cents was to be added in the fall. For most people, the meaning of the sanitation strike had been grounded in feelings about black people, and about unions, and about social change itself. It had little to do with the real problems of the sanitation men. Perhaps the public never knew that these men were forced to use a sanitation truck for a lunch counter as well as a restroom. Perhaps they never knew that these men would never be promoted because they were black. But more importantly, perhaps they never cared. The speeches are over now. The marches, the boycotts, the rallies have ended. In the language of the doctor, a temporary remission has been obtained. But the disease lingers on.
Thank you.